Hey Nina, hello, welcome back. Our next
Hey, Robert.
Unfiltered UX, man, it has been a long time. How did
It's
that happen?
been,
I wish,
it happened because life is going on, right?
yeah. Like when they always, at Google, they always said like busy, busy. But I don't feel I was so busy. Just
I
life.
feel busy, but I feel busy with nice stuff. Like I've been
Like,
moving to a new apartment.
yeah, with
I
moving
had
is
a
pain.
nice weekend in France last weekend. Busy, busy in a good
Don't
way.
make people jealous. All right, the community. So let's have you back. Let's get this started. Today, I want to talk about something new that is coming up recently. In the last, I would say, couple of months, slowly it started, which is the question: how do we react if a future employer tells us that you have to work 60 to 70 hours per week for this job?
And that's something that you've seen coming up, right? Like in
Exactly. Yeah.
conversation with coaches. Yeah.
Sometimes it's in the job postings, it's already there. Sometimes employers bring it up during the recruiter call, like in the beginning, the screener call, and it is increasing in frequency. And so the first couple of times I saw it 60, 70 hours, I went like, my father, when I was young and I said stupid things, he would go like that. Or he would go like that.
And so the employers are young and stupid, you mean? No, but like I think it's interesting, right? Because it's not just the demands that employers make nowadays in this really tough market from or the commitments that they are asking for from people who are applying newly to jobs, who are entering a new job. But it's also like I hear that also from coaches who are in jobs where kind of like the expectations change and they are being asked to do things or agree things either officially or unofficially that weren't part of the deal up
Yeah.
front, where a similar decision happens, right? Or where they need to make a similar decision about, am I okay with this? Do I agree to this? Not doesn't really sound attractive, but what are my options? Like this, I think the feeling of being forced or pushed into something that we're not comfortable with and that we don't feel cool about, that's the same thing that's happening there. And so I think that question is not just for job seekers, but also for people who are in jobs.
That's true. That's true. And I think maybe we can talk about a couple of things here. Like one is like, why is this happening? But then also, why does it not make any sense to work 60 to 70 hours a week just from a very foundational philosophical, psychological and physiological level? But then also more hands-on, like how do you actually react when these kind of things happen? Having kind of a framework on preparing yourself if that happens to know how you want to react, because many times people are kind of being like taken by surprise, right? Because it comes up and then they don't know how to wing it in that situation because they were not prepared for that kind of question.
Yeah, and I think also that question of like, do we need to wing it? Do we need to have the correct or the best answer in that situation? I think that's also always an interesting point because that's a personality thing as well, right? Like some people are better able to wing it. Some people are feel very bad at doing that because they have a different kind of like mindset to, I am taking a decision and
Yeah.
now I have to, or I'm giving an answer and now I have to live by that answer.
But even people who are good at winging it benefit from preparing and having to wing less. So maybe that's helpful too. So first of all, I mean, we can be pretty short about why this is happening. My son always says sometimes when I get angry with him and say like, why did you say or why did you do that? He will go like, because I can. So that's pretty much the reason why this happens
Yeah.
is companies can get away with it because the competition in the market is so huge, because so many people have been laid off, that they can now demand more and more from their employees, even if it's totally nonsensical. They can just do
That's
that.
it, right? Like it's the same level of maturity as well. It's like, yes, you can ask for that, but it's going to bite you in the ass in the end. Like you're not going to be happy with enforcing this or with the consequences of enforcing that because it's also going to affect and impact how your employees are going to behave towards you and towards their job.
Yeah, totally. So it makes obviously no sense, but a lot of things don't make sense in the market right now, and that's one of them. So that's why companies are asking for it. I think a second reason for that is because companies have engaged in widespread layoffs, have laid off people who were doing work that was important, with the idea that this work can now be replaced by AI. I don't think the reality is anywhere close to that. And so that work that is necessary needs to be taken up by the people who are left. And the AI is not helping them to actually do that work. And so as a result of that, work becomes what some call more intense, which is a euphemism for working yourself to the bones. And there's even research. I read a study where they looked into a company that has about 200 employees. And they looked, and that company bought a lot of AI tools, implemented them. And then they looked how work changed. And the result was that people worked more, 60 to 70 hours a week, to do the jobs that they were doing before, because in addition to their jobs, they now had to handle all these AI tools. And there was this expectation that now they need to be more productive. And because the AI tools are not helping them to be more productive, they compensate by adding more hours.
So maybe just to recap, because I think we were a bit short on the why, right? Like you said, like they can, and that's for the people who haven't been following our conversations, because the job market is what it is right now, where a lot of very competent, very experienced people are competing for a relatively small number of jobs. And so employers feel they can kind of take their pick and have somewhat unreasonable demands to people as well, and still find someone who will be willing to and able to do that job, right? So that's the first factor, they can. And then the second one is this belief and also marketing of AI as a solution to efficiency gains, right? Which they kind of need to believe in, because oftentimes they're the same people who are selling that, right? So they need to kind of like show, yeah, our AI is so great. We can actually do what we did before, or we can do better than what we did before with less people. And they also kind of like need to market that to shareholders, to customers, right? In order for them to still buy into that story and give them money. And so they need to show that that's happening by laying people off, resulting in people in the job actually having to do their own jobs plus the jobs of the people that were let go.
I mean, that is, I think, the hilarious part here, if you think about it. If AI is supposed to make us more efficient, shouldn't we be working less, or at least the same amount than before? Because now we can do the work of two in the same amount of hours. Why is everybody working themselves to the bones? Because no matter with whom you speak, right? I'm in contact with people who work at large companies like Google, Microsoft, Meta, right? But also smaller companies. Everybody's saying the same. Like, it's crazy right now, the amount of time they have to invest in their jobs compared to the past, right? So that doesn't sum up. Like, there's somewhere in that equation, something is not summing up. And
that's across different functions as well, right? It's not a UX thing that we hear that from engineers, we hear that from PMs as well.
Different industries too, right? It's not only tech, right? So it's everywhere. That expectation that people should be more efficient, that doesn't line up with the reality. And especially if you have laid off so many people, somewhere someone didn't do their homework.
Right. And so you wouldn't expect to see job openings that explicitly state that the expectation is for you to work 60 to 70 hours a week, but we do, which brings us to the question of how do we handle that, right? What do we do about that?
Exactly. If we move over to how should you react in such a situation? It's important, like always. We always say that, right? It's like there's no one size fits all solution here, because it depends a lot on your situation, your personal situation, and how you react, right? Like, do you have a job? Are you unemployed? Are you under financial pressure or not, right? These are factors that will impact your behavior in these situations.
Also, like, have you had jobs before? Because also what we're seeing is a lot of people who are just joining UX as an industry right now, they are having a really, really hard time, because employers are so focused on real life, practical, proven experience now that new starters do have to make a lot of compromises now that they wouldn't have had to do.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't even think about that, but it's true, right? There can be another type of pressure, which is the pressure to gain experience, right? And so, yes, that might impact your decision too. But I think no matter in what situation you are, and we can talk through the different situations, what I think is good is that you think about this beforehand, before you get into that situation, before you get asked or you see such a job post, right? How will I deal with that situation based on your possibilities, on your values, right? On whatever it is that you let yourself, that you use to guide yourself. And then you are prepared and you know how to handle that situation. You don't have to wing it and then maybe end up with an outcome you don't want.
And again, I think that's true also for people who are not looking for a job, people who are in a job, right? Like this practice of knowing what is important to you, knowing what is important to you in the moment, like that doesn't need to be true a year from now or even tomorrow, right? That changes and it's fine that changes, but like checking in with yourself frequently and making time to kind of like, sit down and understand what are things that are important to me and how do they stack rank? If I have to make a trade-off between two things, say like there's the opportunity to gather experience and there's my need for enough downtime during the week, a need for having time for family or friends or whatever, right? Or for a hobby, earning money, all of those things, they are all important to me, but I can only take a decision if I know the relative importance of them, like which of those is most important to me right now and which one am I able to kind of like deprioritize for a bit at least in order to meet my needs and survive.
Yeah. And maybe before we go into the hands-on like advice on the different situations, also in some countries it's flat out illegal to ask people to work that many hours. I think in the US nobody cares because there's pretty much no laws that protect workers. But if you're not in the US, I mean, just know your rights. And I mean, it could also be that like if you are in a country where this is illegal, you will not find it in a job posting, right? Because that would be flat out like posting something illegal. Maybe they will kind of allude to it in the interviews and be more like less clear, like not 60 to 70 hours, but like, we have a very intense way of working, like that kind of like euphemism language and stuff. But just be aware what is the situation in the country you're in, right? And what can they ask for you? That might impact also how these conversations go.
Or how you behave after you've gotten the job, right? Because that obviously then opens the discussion about now I am in the job and that expectation that I've agreed to, I know that it's illegal. So I might have a different conversation about adhering to that expectation than if I didn't know that.
Yeah, depending on how urgently you need that job or not, obviously.
And I think the important piece in there that we might want to make explicit, right, is like this stance towards an employer or a potential employer. I think that's something that I had to really learn and teach myself and remind myself about. It's like if you're applying for a job, that's always a two-way street. Like you're assessing them as much as they assess you. But also, it's kind of like you have a certain degree of flexibility and actionability, even in a situation, even in a market like today, about like what you do, what you say yes to, and what you wiggle out of maybe as well later on.
Are you trying to say in very complicated terms, you can say, no problem, I will work 60 to 70 hours and then not do it? Under the risk that you might lose that job again, but you're fine with that.
So you're in that, and it's not like that this is not your final step. Like this is one move that you make in your overall career that is not forever. Like you're going to continue to look for a job, for example. Like this is you're looking at the 60 to 70 thing, like, and that says something about that employer. And maybe you're fine with that. Maybe you're totally cool with like having super long days and that fits your idea of kind of like growing in a certain way as well. But maybe you think that's bullshit, but you need the job. and then you agree to it, right? And then you see what you get away with, because that's clearly what they are doing. They are looking at like, what can we get away with? So it's like them saying, that's the terms of the game, right? And they apply to both sides again. Like if they can do and look like what their boundaries are, you're entitled to do the same. Do it.
100% agree. And maybe before we go into what are the different options? A side note, right? It makes no sense to have somebody work 60 to 70 hours, right? I can only repeat that, and I always tell the same story, right? When I was managing teams at Google, I had people in Europe, I had people in the US. People in the US had always lower work-life balance ratings. They reported to work more hours, but I've never seen any significant output difference between people in Europe and the US. And that's simply that if you work 60 hours a day, you're less productive in that time. At the end, if you're lucky, you get the same amount of work done in those 60 hours than somebody in 40 hours and is rested, right? So being rested, there's a reason, if you look into sports, right, that there's an entire science about rest. Right. And how do you train? How do you engage in sports activities? And when do you rest so you have less injuries and so you actually can reach your peak performance? And it's the same with working. Right. So a company that demands from their people to work 60, 70 hours a week continuously. Right. That makes no sense and is against any research that we have out there. Right. If you say, well, there might be a peak where maybe for 1 or 2 weeks you need to just invest more because we're before a launch and everything needs to work out, right? And afterwards you compensate for that, right? We're not talking about that, right? These kind of things can happen, or you're doing a field research somewhere crazy and you have to work crazy hours. We've all done that. It's not that we cannot do that for a short period of time. It's like a sprint, right? You can give everything during a short amount of time, but then afterwards you need to rest because you're out of energy. But yeah, I mean, these are not conversations to have with those companies because they clearly do not care about the science behind it. They just do it because they can.
And it's interesting because it says something about like how they see people, right? Because having this kind of like metric for impact or for productivity that's measured in hours, not in actual output, that also says we're looking at you as kind of like a replaceable robot. We're going to take your time and force you to, because they're not saying we want you to sit at your computer for 60 to 70 hours and just be present, right? They want you to do something, and they know that you can't sustain that kind of these hours. Most people, there are always exceptions, but like most people will not be able to sustain those hours with good quality. And obviously, the moment your quality drops, they're going to get rid of you. They don't want you burned out and not producing good work. They're going to get rid of you the moment the quality is not at level and you're also doing the quantitative output. That is a very clear indicator about like what you can expect in terms of loyalty from that kind of employer as well.
Loyalty. Expecting loyalty from employers is thing of the past. You're year 2000, Nina.
I don't believe you can expect it from them. That's already a step forward for me. I'm not 2000. I'm 2003, I'd say.
All right. Okay, so if you are confronted with that demand, for instance, in a job posting or in a screener call, or later on during negotiations, it can be at any stage where you're confronted with that. Some employers are more upfront, some employers come later in the game with that information.
Some of them come when you're already maybe have been working there for 2 years and they change the rules.
Yeah, you signed and you started and they're like, hey, you can't work only 40, 50 hours a week. Okay, so it's good to think about what is your behavior in that situation, right? And let's go systematically through the different things, right? One is you are in a situation where you can flat out say no to this, right? Because this is against your values. It's against what you think makes sense. It's against work-life balance, against other interests, hobbies, families, friends, whatever it is, right? And you have the luxury to say no to this because either you have a job or you're in a financially privileged situation where you have savings or someone else who's earning the income or whatever it is, right? And so your answer then is just like, oh, thanks for letting me know, right? No, that is not compatible with my current work life situation, and thanks a lot. goodbye.
Or screw you.
So
I mean, you might also want to be explicit about your reasons and how you feel about it.
I'm not going to support that kind of behavior. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like being, a hero. So I think that is totally valid. And if you're in that situation where you can say flat out no, you don't even want to engage in that, not even for practice purpose or anything like that. You just say like, I want to be really forceful and clear and set a boundary here. So that's one option. I think totally legit. And if you're in that situation, good for you. I'm happy for you. Not everybody is, right? I say this because I mean, clearly some people don't have that luxury, right? So I realize saying that comes out of a privileged situation where you don't need that job. That's one. The other one is you clearly don't want and need that job. So the same situation, you don't want that job because you will not work that much. But you say, you know what? It's an opportunity for practice, right? I'll just say yes. Yeah, sure. No problem.
So practice for getting like interview practice, you mean, right?
Practice for interviewing. Yeah, you can say, hey, yes, no problem. I worked many times in my life. I worked 60 to 70 hours a week. Or you can say like, oh, that's not normal. I've always worked that amount of hours.
I'm happy with that.
For decades. Like this. Yeah. And you move on because you want to practice, see how far you get, practice interviewing, practice presenting, right? Always knowing that you will not take that job. Legit, would you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, also it gives you kind of like, if you're in a job, leverage with your current employer as well, being in that process. So absolutely, if you do it under those, like knowing those constraints for yourself, totally legit decision. Yeah.
There's one small caveat here that I need to flag because I just recently had that, right? It might be that while you do the interviews, you realize you actually want that job. Maybe it's an interesting challenge, an interesting product, or the people you speak with are exciting. You feel like you can learn something, right?
Great practice to test your priorities, right? And think about like, do they change?
Yeah.
Is the carrot that's being presented so wonderful that you're actually rethinking how you would stack rank?
Exactly. And again, here, I don't think there's a right or wrong, right? If you feel like, well, for instance, I have this example. There is here like a very famous architect company. It's called Herzog and Dümmerow. Like they made like famous buildings around the world. And people who work there as an entry-level position, they know they will get paid below minimum wage and they will work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And they do that because they know after 2 to 3 years of working there and having that in your resume, you can get any job, right? So they're basically investing in their future that way because they feel it's going to be paying out for them. Those things are legit. I just want to flag that is important for you to also listen to your health, right? It's like, can you do that? Will you burn out? How much? There is a price attached to that, right? And so there's different resilience from people. Like you might be in different situation. You're like just out of university. You don't have a family. You don't have kids. You don't have your parents to take care of because they're not that old, right? And you're like, I can power through 2 to 3 years. It's different than if, I have 4 kids at home and one has a disability and my parents are getting older, many of those things. So just also weigh that accordingly. Don't ignore that.
That's a super interesting point that you make. And I think that goes back to not just knowing what your priorities are, but also to check in on them again regularly, right? Making time and even like putting that time in your calendar so you don't forget, right? Because especially when you decide I'm okay with busy for a while, that tends to kind of like fall under the table. So having those occasions to check back, is this still working for me? Am I still okay with that? And being very explicit, not only about what am I working towards, but also what are kind of like the flags for this is going off the rails? Like, what are the metrics that I'm looking at? How often am I sick, for example, right? Have I spoken with someone outside of work? Like, is my community still something that can carry me if that work breaks away? Defining those things up front and then making space and time to regularly check in on them is super important.
I agree, and I mean you have gotten particularly good at that, Nina. And for the listeners to know, because Nina wrote about this in the past, right? Nina has gone through a burnout in the past when she was at Google and had to learn this the hard way. And I think nowadays you're really good at that. I really admire these skills in you. So if you need somebody to help you with that, Nina is the place to go. She knows how to check in on herself. Okay, so these are kind of like, okay, if you're in this privileged situation where you can say no. Now, what if you're not in that privileged situation, right? What if you actually do need a job? And again, there can be two situations here. Like one is you have a job that you hate. You want to get out of that, right? The other, so basically you're paying a price for it. I'm working with many people that are in that situation. They have a job and say, like, my manager is toxic, the company has turned toxic, like, I really need to get the hell out of there. Or you do need that job because you've been employed for a while, your savings are running low, right? You're moving into debt, right? You really need a job, right? So you're not in that privileged situation. What do you do then?
Again, like you go back to stack ranking your priorities. And I mean, putting food on the table, being able to pay your bills, being able to pay rent, it's fine if that is your top priority, right?
Maslow's pyramid is pretty, exactly. It's pretty basic. That one, yeah, exactly. So if you're in that situation, I think it's totally legit to say, well, I will say yes, I will interview, and if it works out, I will work these amount of hours if needed, right? As you said, you can always figure out how much is really required after you have the job. But I will do that. And then either just, okay, I'll figure out how it goes, or I will do that and continue interviewing in parallel, right? So this will put food on my table while I'm going to continue interviewing, which will be difficult if you have to work 60 to 70 hours a week. I need to caveat that.
I mean, they said 60 to 70 hours work, right? They didn't say productive work. So if you're at your computer, exactly, yeah. You're still doing it. And like getting rid of you is going to take some time anyway. So you at least you have a couple of months.
Typically, you won't be put on the street immediately, right? So yes, you say like, okay, this is an intermediate step. And here I go back to what we said multiple times. A work contract is a work contract. And on that contract, it says what the commitment is both ways. Right. So how long do you have to stay when you decide to leave? In the US, that's mostly employment at will. So you don't have to stay anything. You pretty much say like tomorrow I won't come back. Right. The same way the employer can do it with you. In other countries, you have commitments that are longer, typically still like mostly in the beginning of a job, like probation periods. It's not so long. But so there is a contract. And that contract does not bind you to that company in any kind of way that goes beyond that. People sometimes feel like there is a moral obligation. Yeah. If I said yes to this company, that means I need to stay at least for a year.
Or even longer, right? Like they gave me that chance, now I owe them. And I feel like, especially in Europe and especially with women, that really is like we've been raised like this, right? We've grown up with those examples of like parents who've been spending their entire career at the same company with the same employer and the same job. And that's just not something that is realistic anymore. For most of us, that's not going to be our life, our career, right? And that's fine. Like we need to accept that being fired is probably at some point going to be a part of our career. Being laid off, that's just something that happens to us now. But it also means it gives us freedom to say, this is not working for me anymore. There's something better out there. And I don't owe an employer something just because they gave me money for a while. That was a fair exchange. So I'm totally free to look for greener pastures myself as well. And it doesn't mean I'm flaky.
100%, yes. I mean, there's this one-sided loyalty, I said it before, that's a thing of the past, right? If you don't get job security, that means you also don't give them that you will stay there for a minimum of time.
I mean, they expect flexibility from us, right? Flexibility is something that is a part of their description of a professional now. Being able to adjust, being able to do new things, working with new technology, but also like moving into new ways that our old role is shaping up in the future. So we need to be flexible as professionals, but that also means we can be flexible about where we do that.
Yeah. And especially in the context of somebody asking you for something I consider immoral, working 60 to 70 hours a week is wrong, right? So a company starts with the premise of asking you something that is illegal in many countries, right? And that should be illegal in the US, right? Is asking you for something like that from the beginning, right? Why would you hesitate to leave that company again? If you say like, well, I found a company where they don't want me to work that much, right? And I earn the same, right? It's a cost benefit ratio is simple, right? It's like I get the same salary, but I need to work 40 to 50 hours a week instead of 60 to 70. That seems like a good deal to me.
So
right?
I hope the 60 to 70 hours is still an edge case, but like even without that extreme edge case, it kind of makes it easy for you to see they don't care about me as a human being with needs, with biological needs to recover, right? Where even I'm a very loyal person, I've really struggled with kind of like giving myself that permission to prioritize my own needs over those of an employer. Even I, in that situation, wouldn't have a huge problem saying, hey, you know what, I found something more reasonable, I'm off. Like even in a setting where that is not the case, where like they don't overtax you, obviously, it's still fine to kind of like find something that maybe even just pays you better or gives you a better position or is a more interesting opportunity. And it doesn't say anything about you as a human being in a negative way if you prioritize that opportunity for yourself and jump at it.
Exactly. And so that's, I would say, like a good way of approaching it, a healthy way to say like, okay, I need this. I will do it for a while. And if I find something better, I will try to find something better, but then do it, right? I think it's important because I've seen people then basically digging into that work so much that they found themselves in this very negative situation of having to work so much, and they kind of like deprioritized the looking for another job, and that's a dangerous thing there, right?
There's a negative spiral there as well, right? Like you kind of like go into this burning out, both in terms of like energy that you have, but also in terms of like how you believe in yourself, because everything becomes harder and you get more stuck in there and you beat yourself up about it maybe, and all of that is not productive. So kind of like going back to defining those red lines and making sure that you create opportunities for yourself to see, am I across that red line? And am I spending enough time and also maybe scheduling time for applications and interviewing still?
Yeah. Because that spiral also is like, okay, if you burn out of energy, right, how will you find another job? Because now you're no longer doing well because you worked yourselves to the bone. So it is, I mean, realistically, given that many people are not in the privileged situation of just having magically food on their table, I think this is a valid way, but it comes with a bunch of dangers and you should be aware of them and paying attention. And ideally, you have somebody outside of yourself that also helps you as kind of like a warning signal. For me, that's my wife. She's really good in that, and she pays attention and she goes like, I really think you're working too much, right? Like this, you wouldn't have reacted this way if you would be rested, right? So someone that checks in with you regularly and just makes sure you're not entering the spiral of death.
That's super important because we talked about like stack ranking priorities, right? But also temporarily, like if you say, for example, I work 60 to 70 hours a week, that will mean you will have less time for your community. It does not mean your community becomes unimportant and you don't need it anymore. You still need to make sure that over time, there is some, like you can keep that afloat and that you shift back to putting more energy and more time into those things that holistically keep you sane and in working, not just working condition, in a livable situation, right? In something that is actually not just putting bread on the table, but living, having a life. And so again, going back to making sure that not just agreeing to something because it's your top priority right now, but monitoring with real metrics and real definitions of what a red line is, and ensuring that like every other month you sit down with yourself and you check, am I there? Have I talked to somebody who will be able to flag, no, this is not good anymore? That's something that needs to happen. And for me personally, that means I need to put it in my calendar. I need to make sure that I am reminded, because otherwise it's going to be October and I will not have talked to a friend.
One last thing here. If you say no to a company because of the working hour requirement, or if you take a job that where you have to work that much, and then you leave that job because you found something where you have to work less, this is my personal ask to you. Please communicate that to the company, celebrate it, right? Reflect back to them. Hey, this is why you're losing me, right? Like, I think companies need to pay a price for it. So maybe one day, now they can, because they can, but in the future, maybe there will be a moment where the price of demanding this from their employees is too high, right? And they will move back to something more reasonable. And the only thing that will happen is if they realize they lose good candidates because of that. So if you have the opportunity to say no because of that, make sure they know it's because of that.
And likewise, like if you are in a position in a company where you kind of like need to, where you're in those conversations about like, what do we actually communicate? How do we actually position ourselves? Or if you land in one of those positions, push back on that and have a conversation about the cost of that, the trade-off that you're making as a company. As well, because we all do influence what is acceptable, what is normal with those conversations.
All right. Well, that was nice, Nina.
No, it wasn't. Like now my pulse is really high. Like now I need to drink a chamomile tea or something.
Yeah, because you think about all these evil employers but to end on a positive note, just to be clear, like in most cases, employers don't ask for these sexy 70 hours. It's still outliers. It might become more in the future, right? So we need to monitor that in the future. But right now, it is something that I have seen creeping up. And so I think it's good that candidates are equipped and think about how to react in the situation beforehand. But hopefully, this will not happen to you. But if it does, now you have a framework on how to think about this.
Agreed.
All right, that was it for this Unfiltered UX session. I'll leave a link here if you want to provide us with questions or topics we should talk about in the future. I wish you a good time and talk soon to you.
So much fun. Talk
Bye-bye.
to you soon. Bye.